All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Blair Cullen. I am a PhD candidate at Wilfrid Laurier University. And today you are here for the Pathways to Prosperity Partnership on intersectoral collaboration and non-traditional settlement sectors, the impact of intersectoral collaboration on non-traditional sectors, a case study of local immigration partnerships in Ontario. The first and foremost, we'd like to thank the the organizers for organizing this afternoon. We're really grateful for this opportunity to present this interesting info to you. We thank you for joining us. So the title of the webinar this afternoon is the impact of intersectoral collaboration on non-traditional settlement sectors, a case of local immigration partnerships in Ontario. And just to give you kind of a brief background and intro on what our topic is about and why we formed a panel and a webinar based on this topic. So as many of you know, LIPs, they were introduced in 2008, and local immigration partnerships, or LIPs, are multi-sectoral community-based councils whose main goal is to develop a local settlement strategy to produce a more welcoming community. Now, LIPs have really taken off over the last decade. There's currently 86 of them across Canada in every province, with the exception of Quebec. So, you know, the scope is far and wide of this policy, and it's received a lot of positive feedback in government and policy circles as a best practice and something that we're going to see continue. And LIPs really started, rose out of a call from the settlement sector. The settlement sector very much pushed, especially in Toronto, for a vehicle like this for years. But the interesting part about LIPs is that most of their work is with organizations and sectors outside the settlement sector, what we call, non-traditional settlement organizations, things like school boards and hospitals and libraries and police forces and these type of things. And really, a lot of the LIPs work, since they have this multi-sectoral makeup and expanded the mandate of settlement, is working with these non-traditional settlement organizations to improve their diversity competencies, their inclusion principles, how they go about treating different immigrant and refugee populations. So what we wanted to do with this workshop is we wanted to see kind of what the impact of that has been, with LIPs bringing a more welcoming communities approach involving all these sectors. What has actually happened to these non-traditional settlement sectors? Has there been any influence? Have LIPs made any difference in helping any of these non-traditional settlement organization sectors become more diversity competent? And the best example I can think of is from one of my participants I had in a prior research project. I remember her saying, the whole idea with LIPs is if there's a issue about migration at a place like a legal aid clinic or a hospital, rather than calling a settlement worker or someone from the settlement sector to put out the fire, address the issue, that there's enough institutional knowledge and awareness within that organization to address it on their own without having to resort to these type of sectors in an emergency way. And that, in terms of education, awareness, and knowledge, is ultimately what the goal is. So we wanted to test out kind of if that, as in theory, that's how it's supposed to work, to see in practice how it's actually worked. So the format we're going to follow today is very simple. We have 3 presentations. They will each be around 15 minutes. Once each presentation is done, I'll move to the next presentation. We'll take questions at the end. You'll see at the bottom of your screen, I've been told by the organizers that there's a question and answers function, which you can type your questions in there. You can type your questions at any point during the presentations, and we'll just keep a log of those questions and address them at the end. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Her name is Aishan Mamazad, And she is a second-year PhD student in the geography program for specialization in Canadian studies at the University of Ottawa. She's also a researcher at Ottawa's local immigration partnership, and she has a vast background in health and migration, both at an international level with the United Nations, also in the States, at the University of Chicago Center for Health Administration Studies. And her current research focuses on conceptualizing skilled migrants, resilience in post-pandemic Canada's National Capital Region, which is Ottawa, the role of gender, occupation, and place. And the title of her presentation today is Best Practices by OLIP and Partners for Refreshing Ottawa Immigration Strategy by Developing and Implementing 5 Sectoral Table Initiatives. So without further ado, I will hand over the floor to her.
Thank you, Blair, for the best introduction. I will start my presentation. First, I have to switch off, unfortunately, my video due to non-stable internet connection. So now I'm sharing my screen. First, I will start from the overview of our presentation today. I want to give some background information about OLIP partnership. OLIP partnership is a multi-sectoral partnership, which means that it involves different sectors such as government, nonprofit organizations, and private sector entities. And the partnership also has a multi-level governance structure and process, which ensures that decision-making is participatory and transparent. One of the key strengths of the partnership is that it has a shared vision and approach, which I will describe in the later slides in a deeper context, which means that all partners are aligned in their goals and strategies. The partnership also has a shared strategy, which outlines the specific actions that partners will take to achieve their goals. So, and the partnership also has sector tables, which are groups of partners that focus on specific sectors, such as health, education, employment, and other sector tables. The OLIP partnership is a collaborative effort between 60 local organizations across 5 sectors. And it's a collaboration that spans across jurisdictions with partners working together on a common vision and shared priorities. It's based on mutual support and collaborative leadership, which helps to bridge silos and enable deeper progress. It is supported by a collaborative governance system that enables partners to connect regularly, set shared priorities, and plan strategic actions. The partnership is comprised of 9 tables and 150 individuals with an executive committee and a secretariat to support its work. And it has identified several targeted collective impact goals, including economic integration, a seamless continuum of relevant and accessible settlement, education, health and social services, inclusive and equitable organizations, and fostering a welcoming Ottawa. The Ottawa Immigration Strategy, the OIS, is a vision and roadmap to desired impacts. It's a compendium of mutually reinforcing sectoral priorities, guiding partners, bottom-up planning. The strategy is dynamic and refreshed every 5 years. OLIP partners include various departments within the city of Ottawa, settlement service provider organizations, local school boards, universities and colleges, academic researchers, healthcare providers, housing providers, social service providers, neighborhood-based organizations, all levels of government, immigrant civic groups, and the Ottawa public through WOW, Welcoming Ottawa Week campaigns. OLIP aims to strengthen the integration of newcomers into the community by promoting coordination and collaboration between different organizations and stakeholders, facilitating access to services, and promoting diversity and inclusion. This slide describes the common agenda and approach of OLIP partners. The vision of OLIP partners is to work across jurisdictions to build a more vibrant, prosperous, and inclusive national capital. strengthened by the contribution of immigrants. The approach of all partners is based on collective and collaborative efforts that involve all stakeholders in the process of integrating newcomers into the community. And this approach recognizes that integration is a two-way street that requires the active participation of both newcomers and the receiving community. The partners also emphasize the importance of a transformational approach rather than a transactional approach. This means that the focus is not just on delivering services to newcomers, but on working collaboratively to transfer the community into a more welcoming and inclusive place for all. This is the structure and the process of OLIP governance, and the structure, as I mentioned, is comprised by OLIP Executive Committee, OLIP Secretariat, and OLIP Leadership Group, 6 sector tables, public engagement, partnership council, and common purpose and collective impact take different processes to achieve the OLIP governance goals. Next important slide. This slide describes the Ottawa immigration strategy as a roadmap to achieving the shared vision of OLIP partners for Ottawa. The OIS was first launched in June 2011 and refreshed in 2016, with the third edition now in development. The Ottawa immigration strategy is a community strategy that outlines the shared goals of OLIP partners and provides a framework for collaboration across 5 sectors, policy jurisdictions. The implementation of Ottawa immigration strategy is a shared responsibility that requires collaborative leadership, strategic alignments, community engagement, and flexible governance system to support the implementation of the strategy. As part of the collaborative governance, all partners agreed to renew the Ottawa immigration strategy every 5 years to adjust their work to evolving needs and contexts and to incorporate gains made over time. And since the launch of the Ottawa immigration strategy in 2011, it has undergone 2 refreshments, with the first action period from 2011 to 2015, the second from 2016 to 2022, and the third action period from 2023 to 2027. The second period was marked by multiple crises, including the global refugee crisis after the Syrian war, public uprisings against institutionalized racism, and the global pandemic and health equity crisis. But despite these challenges, all the partners made a major difference in addressing this crisis, and their connection remains their strengths. Now, Ottawa immigration strategy continues to guide the collaborative efforts of all the partners to build a more welcoming, inclusive, and prosperous community in Ottawa. Backbone supports by the Secretariat. This slide outlines this support provided by the Secretariat to facilitate the evaluation of all the partners' common agenda. The Secretariat plays a critical role in convening and facilitating dialogues, leadership engagements, strategic alignments, and defining action strategies and frameworks to achieve collective impact on priority goals. It also provides support for data capacity development to strengthen the partnership's analytic capacity. This involves improving how they see needs, analyze gaps, and gauge process on priority goals. I want to mention and stress especially the Equity Ottawa Partnership. It's another backbone support provided by the Secretariat. Its purpose is to cultivate inclusive and equitable organizations by providing a monthly community of practice that supports continuous learning through peer support, expertise, and custom tools and resources. Finally, the Welcoming Ottawa Weeks. WOW is a series of partner-hosted events designed to convey Ottawa's genuine welcome and respect to newcomers. A shared calendar and key supports are provided to organizations to facilitate their connections with immigrants, creating a welcoming and inclusive community for all. This slide provides an update on the progress and next milestones of data capacity development in OLIP from 2019 to 2023. Data capacity development was identified as a priority across all OLIP sectors in 2016, and since then, the Secretariat has led multiple data initiatives, including a data partnership with IRCC, 6 consultations to clarify partners' data needs, a feasibility study on data availability, and the development of medium-term data strategies that includes goals, approach, conceptual frameworks, scope, and indicators. The Secretariat is also engaged in ongoing data development, including the creation of tables and dashboards. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, OLIP partners initiated the COVID Data for Action project, involving 6 projects to provide timely and relevant data to support decision-making in the face of the pandemic. But currently, the focus is on data delivery, and the Secretariat is working to ensure that data is accessible and delivered in a user-friendly format that meets the needs of OLIP partners. Equity Ottawa Partnership goals. This slide outlines the goals of Equity Ottawa Partnership, which is a backbone support I mentioned in the previous slides. The goals of the partnership are to cultivate equitable and inclusive organizations where immigrants and racialized populations can access relevant and high-quality services. This partnership recognizes the systemic and structural challenges that inhibit progress on equity and aims to create collective attention on addressing these challenges. By building a supportive environment that counters systemic inequities, the partnership seeks to create a more equitable and inclusive community for all. This slide describes the innovative approach of Equity Ottawa in cultivating inclusive and equitable organizations. Equity Ottawa uses a range of approaches, including peer support, expert knowledge, community engagement, and collaborative progress monitoring to help partners build more equitable and inclusive organizations. The approach includes a community of practice, which provides a safe space for reflection and shared learning, as well as peer support and community engagement. Expert knowledge events are also organized as part of the Equity Ottawa approach, with guest experts invited to participate in the community of practice and learning events to share their knowledge and experience. Action support tools and resources are also provided to support partners in their efforts to build more equitable and inclusive organizations. Welcoming Ottawa Weeks. This slide provides an overview of Welcoming Ottawa Weeks initiative, which is an important component of OLIP's efforts to create a welcoming and inclusive community. WOW is a series of cultural events, celebrations, dialogues, town halls, learning events, sports activities, guided tours, food tastings, documentary screenings, and other fun engagements that aim to convey Ottawa's genuine respect and welcome to newcomers. And this initiative was initiated by OLIP in 2013 and has since been championed by the Mayor of Ottawa. CBC is a key partner in the initiative, and over 50 event hosts have participated in WOW since its inception. Additionally, WOW includes the awards programs that recognizes and promotes welcoming attitudes to newcomers. Now I want to share the priorities and the results of sectoral tables. First, economic integration priorities. The priority first is extend and improve strategic alignment among institutions and initiatives. The second one, help immigrants navigate towards employment in a changing labor market attitudes, and to expand the scope of support to include career progression and skills development. and adaptation. Priority 3 strengthens the capacity of employers to hire immigrants and create strategic targets for these priorities, such as key sectors and or types of employers, such as small and medium enterprises. Priority 4 promote and support entrepreneurship among newcomers and immigrants. The strategic priority 5 enhance Ottawa's ability to recruit newcomers by projecting itself as a diverse world-class capital that welcomes newcomers and international students especially, makes them feel welcomed where diversity is celebrated. As the next priority, clarifying misconceptions and myths about immigrants' human capital and competitive advantage and their contributions to Ottawa's economic sectors and workplaces. The final one is to find, amplify, and create innovations to address the barriers in economic integration for newcomers. The next sector table is education. The first, we have 4 priorities after refreshing Ottawa immigration strategy policy, and the first priority is improve newcomers' academic achievement and well-being by defining and addressing systemic inequities behind disparities in these outcomes and develop shared metrics to track progress. The priority 2, improve immigrant parents' involvement, especially in school activities, student learning, and school governance. The third one, build trust among schools, immigrant students, and racialized communities through improved and shared awareness of newcomer students' experiences in schools, challenges, and opportunities, and through systematic development of solution pathways. The last one is build partnership plans in neighborhoods with a high concentration of immigrants to complement and support school boards' mandates. The third sector table is about health and well-being. The first priority is to improve the importance that governments and healthcare provider organizations attach to immigrant and refugee health, and advocate for prioritization and targeted funding to improve these populations' health status and access to healthcare. Next one is to improve newcomers' access to healthcare, including preventive services, primary healthcare, and dental care. Then improve immigrant and refugees' access to mental health care through greater access to preventive services and mental health promotion, training of counselors, and establishment of culturally relevant trauma counseling, and enhancing health literacy among immigrants and refugees and building agency capacity to support this goal. The fifth and one of the most important ones strengthens the equity capacity of healthcare organizations, including inclusive leadership and culture, equitable human resources practices, and the hiring and retention of immigrant and racialized medical professionals and lay healthcare workers. And the last one improves the quality and accessibility of population health data and of system data bearing on the health and service outcomes of newcomers and stimulate research on immigrants and refugees' health. Language training and interpretation services priorities. We have 5 priorities after refreshment of the strategy. The first one, further improve the planning, deployment, and the quality of federal and provincial language courses so they are complementary and better matched to the needs of Francophone and Anglophone immigrants. Strengthen the capacity of all language sector table to advocate for improvements in language training and interpretation, including creation of additional training options, such as on-the-job language training, improve newcomers' access to specialized language training that supports learner needs, raise awareness of and extend the availability and accessibility of interpretation services to improve access to legal, justice, health, and social services by newcomers with limited proficiency in official languages. The last one is promote special language programming for populations at risk of exclusion, and ensure language instructors are sensitive to the complex challenges faced by this category of learners. The last one is social civic integration, and we have 5 priorities. The first one creates structures and relationships. that will help service providers design inclusive programs and governance structures and policies to better serve immigrants and ethnocultural minority communities, create bridging opportunities for ethnocultural communities by promoting collaborative and inclusive cultural and recreational activities, as well as enhancing access to inclusive services and activities. The third one, promoting and scaling up youth programs that are collaborative, achieve multiple outcomes, and create value for immigrants, ethnocultural minority communities, and the city. The last two ones are enhanced the quantity, accuracy, and understandability of information available to immigrants and ethnocultural minority communities. And the last one improves the capacity of immigrant civic associations and ethnocultural minority communities to develop stronger links with institutions, elected officials, and service providers. Thank you for your attention, and if you have any further questions, I am happy to answer any of them.
Great presentation, very interesting stuff, especially about what's happening on a policy level and in terms of what OLIP has implemented and is implementing. So Aishan's presentation did a really good job at covering that aspect of our topic. Our next speaker, Shahab Sahafi, his presentation is going to focus more on the academic side of things and what's actually been found in the literature for this type of stuff and what we focus on. So Shahab, he's actually a research coordinator and he works with McMaster, Western University, and the University of Ottawa. And mainly his research interests are health equity, evidence synthesis, guideline development, and evidence-based medicine. And with his research, the goal really is to minimize health disparities and inequities in access to healthcare services. So without further ado, I will turn the floor over to him.
So hi everyone, my name is Shahab Saifi. Thanks Claire for the general bio you put there. So I'm a master's candidate at McMaster University in Health Research Methodology program with a focus in epidemiology. Just become graduated at University of Ottawa in Honors Bachelor of Science in Biology, research coordinator at McMaster University and Western University, and also research flow at Cochrane Equity Methods Group. So for today, I'm just going over our published paper last year. So it's going to be another backbone for the evidence put forward by Aishan and the role of settlement service organizations in supporting access for marginalized populations. So as you see here, we do have the title, how are non-medical settlement service organizations supporting access to healthcare and mental health services for immigrants and refugees. So it was a scoping review. It was published in International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. So you could just browse on the internet and perhaps come up with the paper. We also put the link in the chat bar for your reference. Just a quick background. So upon arrival in high-income countries, for example, countries like Canada, marginalized populations, for example, immigrants and refugees might experience different barriers in accessing primary health care services. And this inequity in access to health services might have different reasons. For example, limited language proficiency or limited health literacy in general, or high service cost, transportation issues, for example, or lack of social support, or different health beliefs that these populations might come across when they are coming to these industrialized countries. So existing literature suggested that countries like for this research paper, our focus was down more on Canada. But I think Canada is becoming a pioneer in setting non-medical settlement organizations. For example, we do have the local immigration partnerships in Canada that they are trying to support immigration integration and let this marginalized population have access to mental health service and healthcare services. We do see across the slides that Canada is becoming popular for putting forward these efforts. That said, so for this published scoping review, our objective was almost clear. So we try to identify and map the types and characteristics of the approaches and interventions that immigrant settlement organizations undertake to support access to primary healthcare for their clients. I should point out that there are some famous organizations around the world. For example, in Canada, it is LIP, but for example, we do have, for example, some famous organizations in the US, and I think they are called Mayor's Offices for Immigrant Affairs, and they are situated in Chicago. And for example, these are the few well-established groups that are trying to help routinely excluded populations. So to put forward our paper last year, and in terms of the methodology, we adopted the social ecological model. That model or framework, better to say, help us to chart the data and analyze the data accordingly. So in terms of methodology, we adopted Arksay and O'Malley's 5-stage methodological framework. So we identified research question as the first stage. And followingly, we identified the relevant studies. We had study selection, we charted the data, and followingly, we summarize and reporting the results with some narrative description in terms of our analysis. So we consulted with a health science librarian last year, and we work with 4 databases listed here. So we work with Medline, Social Services Abstracts like Info and Sino. So we develop a comprehensive search strategy and run them through these databases. We do have some restrictions in terms of our search strategy. For example, we applied some date restrictions. We just focused down on the publications that are coming from May 1st to 2013 till May 31st to 2021. And the reason behind that was that existing literature suggests that after this date here, we do have some missing or limitations in terms of reporting the role of these organizations in terms of how they support access to primary healthcare services for immigrants and refugees. So we defined some eligibility criteria for our search strategy. So it was processed in duplicate with a couple of independent team members. So our target population for this paper was asylum seekers, refugees, and immigrants who are 16 years and older. Perhaps these terms you see here, they do have different definitions. We already covered that in our paper. Perhaps if you have any questions, I could go further into details and how we should differentiate them together. In terms of the intervention, or better to say phenomena of interest in our paper, we just focus down on non-medical, non-clinical, local immigrant settlement organizations that are trying to support immigrant populations' access to healthcare services. In terms of the context, so we know that there are many countries that are having these organizations, but for the purposes of our paper, we just focused on industrialized countries, or better to say high-income countries that are listed by the Commonwealth Fund. So our target countries are Australia, Canada, France, Germany, Netherlands, New Zealand, Norway, Sweden, and Switzerland, UK, and the USA. In terms of the research methods, we just included research publications that employed very properly and very effectively methods, data collection and data analysis in the body of their paper. So we included any quantitative or qualitative research types here, or even so I believe we did have some papers that employed mixed methods in the body of their papers. We excluded commentaries, great literatures, or any unpublished documents to serve our time properly. So these are to some degree our limitations. I'll cover them towards the end for sure. So here's the Prisma diagram. We work with Covidence software. So after working with those 4 databases, I mean Medline, PsycInfo, CINAHL, and Social Service Abstract, we imported all the data there into Covidence. So Covidence is a software dedicated for scoping and systematic reviews. So at the beginning, we had 3299 records. After removing all the duplicates and the papers that did not meet our eligibility criteria, we ended with 10 studies included in our review for the final stage. So in terms of the results, I should point out that our 10 included studies, so 8 of them were conducted in Canada. And this is to some degree, I just emphasize and stress Canada here. As I said, Canada is becoming pioneer in creating these settlement organizations. And we had 1 paper conducted in USA and 1 in Australia. Unfortunately, there was a bit inconsistency in terms of the terminology and the words used to define these organizations. So, for example, they said we do have non-medical immigrant settlement organizations. A couple of them are just called local settlement support agencies, local refugees resettlement agency, community-based organizations, immigrant service agencies, and local receiving center. So as an impact for our paper, I think there would be a necessity to do a systematic review and evidence synthesis. So we should come up with a proper research methodology and see how their services are similar together. And if they are not, we should perhaps report them narratively in that paper as the next step. So based on our scanning through those 10 papers, there are different approaches to support access to primary healthcare services for these vulnerable populations. For example, we had individual level, we had relationship level at the second stage, we had the community level, we had a society level, and even some papers mix them together and say we have multifold levels in terms of supporting immigrants and refugees. And perhaps, and of course, they do have different definitions and characteristics in terms of supporting immigrants. For example, at the individual level, we see that papers are just identify personal and biological factors that directly or indirectly impact health outcomes. But in the relationship level, we do see that there are mostly some concepts around partnerships, for example, or close social environment factors that might impact the health outcomes at the individual level. So we do see that different approaches are undertaken by different organizations and different settings, countries that are trying to provide services for immigrants and refugees. So following with our results, so most of the studies showed that mental health support was the most significant dimension intervention provided by these organizations, and there are different activities and programs trying to have this kind of support for these target populations. For example, we do see that a couple of these organizations, for example, even in Canada, LIPs try to provide health promotion programs, or they are trying to undertaking community capacity building and policy advocacy activities. And also they are trying to provide some on-the-ground assistant to clients. And this package here includes very basic actually services, but these are the first steps that LIPs or any other organizations should respect. Although Canada received a very big loads of funds from different organizations, federal or provincial governments, there might be some limitations or impacts of such I should say governmental bodies on the papers and the body of the research papers. And to some degree, we could say that the activities of organizations might be influenced by the actually governmental bodies for sure. So in terms of limitations in our paper, as I said, this was a scoping review, and unlike systematic reviews, we did not have room and capacity to critically appraise the papers for the quality of the evidence put forward by them. And also in terms of our eligibility criteria, we just stick to published peer review studies. There are thousands of undocumented thesis papers, or generally speaking, dissertations out there. And unfortunately, we could not capture all the papers that are trying to provide some concepts or theories around these organizations, because there is a bit inconsistency in terms of the terminology around these organizations. And as I said before, we do see that there are different names to call these organizations and their services. Last but not least, many of the studies lack details on organizational structure, capacity, and programming. And here again, we could see that probably as an impact for our paper. I think it would be necessary to understand how these organizations are able to support access to primary care. And I think there should be some systematic review, evidence synthesis, or some knowledge translations aside, and to see to what degree these organizations could collaborate with each other or would collaborate with public health sectors. That also said, we could also put forward some case studies for each organization itself and see how they are trying to support access to primary healthcare services or mental health services for immigrants and refugees. And as a conclusion, local non-medical immigrant settlement organizations try to support access to healthcare services by different tasks or actions. For example, they are trying to connect their clients to health services. They are trying to have some partnerships with, for example, Ministry of Health. They are trying to advocate for immigrant health, providing educational programmings. We do see that there are sometimes advocating for knowledge translation programs. And also they are trying to take on community development or mobilization and other activities to promote access to healthcare services. So that's it from my side. I would be more than thrilled to take any questions, suggestions, or feedback from our attendants. Thanks.
All right, much gratitude, Shahab. That was very intriguing presentation. I liked how you used the word pioneer, because I wonder, like, that would connect. There's a growing amount of literature suggesting Canadian immigration policy is considered exceptional, and the merits and drawbacks of that. I'd be curious how that fit with that. So good stuff. Thank you very much. Okay, I am the last presenter today. Just to remind those of you who may come in a bit late, my name is Blair Cullen. I'm a PhD candidate at Wilfrid Laurier University. My research interests are very much about local settlement and resettlement policy in non-traditional settlement destinations. So I'm just going to pull up my talk here, and share my screen and then I will get started. Okay, so the title of the talk I'm going to give today, it's very much kind of, Aishan's talked about more about the policy side of things. Shahab covered the more academic side. My presentation today kind of goes right down the middle in terms of it's an academic approach with research, but it's also based on a particular policy. So the title of what I'm going to talk about today, I will call Welcoming Communities, Local Immigration Partnerships, and Municipalities' Involvement in a New Settlement Landscape. And this presentation is based on an article that I'm co-authoring with Dr. Louisa Veronis of the University of Ottawa and Dr. Martin Roberts of Wilfrid Laurier University. Now, I will be the only one presenting today, but that said, my gratitude stretches far for each of their contributions to this article. So before I get into the meat and bones of this research, I just want to discuss two important concepts, and that's the Welcoming Communities approach and Local Immigration Partnerships, or LIPs. So the Welcoming Communities approach, or the WCA, very much sees settlement as a two-way process where the onus lies solely not on newcomers, but rather a partnership amongst all stakeholders involved. I should mention this, touched on this a bit in her presentation. And this approach goes beyond just looking at settlement as the responsibility only of government-funded settlement service agencies and faith-based ethnocultural non-governmental organizations. It argues that when immigrants arrive, they interact with more than just these traditional organizations, but many institutions as well. So therefore, why should settlement just be limited to these more traditional settlement organizations? In essence, the settlement lens should be broader. And at an institutional level, this means organizations like school boards and mainstream service, social service agencies and healthcare service providers, to name a few, they should be part of the settlement process. Now, at least on paper, local immigration partnerships, they're really the policy embodiment of the Welcoming Communities approach. Introduced in 2008, LIPs are multi-sectoral community-based councils whose main goal is to develop a local settlement strategy to produce a more welcoming community. Now, LIPs are really the first body to try and assemble all the disparate actors in settlement under one banner and take a systematic, coordinated view of settlement. And for the most part, they're primarily funded by Immigration, Refugee, and Citizenship Canada. Now, with the addition of stakeholders to the settlement process through LIPs, our research sought to understand how does the Welcoming Communities approach change the role of certain stakeholders, in this case, municipalities, in the process of settlement. We wanted to understand how Welcoming Communities altered the dynamics of settlement for certain stakeholders. We focused on municipalities because of their long-held peculiar position in local settlement policy. On the one hand, constitutionally and legally, municipalities have no authority on immigration. On the other hand, much research shows how vital their role in settlement is. And at the same time, IRCC designated municipalities as the only mandatory sector in LIPs. So that also made it worth exploring. So essentially, our research question, we looked at under the circumstances of Canada's Syrian Refugee Resettlement Initiative, or the SRI. This paper that I'm talking about today was a project of a larger SSHRC and IRCC research grant in which the role of LIPs in the SRI in 3 mid-sized cities, Waterloo Region, Hamilton, and Ottawa, were compared. A common interview guide and purposeful sampling were employed to ensure consistent data for comparative analysis. For our presentation material today, primary data collection consisted of 21 key informant interviews from Waterloo Region and Ottawa. And generally speaking, participants came from a dozen different sectors in refugee resettlement, everything from mental health to non-governmental organizations. For our secondary data analysis, we looked at publicly available documents and correspondence pertaining to each LIP and each city's SRI efforts. Now, the timing in our data collection was well suited to measuring municipal involvement because of the SRI, due in part to legal and constitutional barriers. Municipalities have a limited history of involvement in immigration. However, the SRI marked a time when a migration topic had a huge public profile and really registered strongly in the public consciousness. Therefore, if there was ever a time that municipalities were going to get involved or face pressure to, it was during the SRI. Just a quick anecdote, I've done multiple research projects in this area of settlement and resettlement in non-traditional settlement places. And in this case, I literally had people asking me if they could be interviewed for this project. It was just such a change and such a huge change in terms of how people approached immigration in these cities of these size in the past. So the rationale for our case study areas, Waterloo Region and Ottawa, was based on 3 factors. Number one, they were both designated resettlement assistant program cities by the federal government and had been since the mid-1980s. Both cities were among the first LIPs introduced in Canada, and thus had the longest history. And geographically, each city is second tier, and they share similar population numbers and numbers of resettled Syrian refugees. Now, one piece I want to point out before I proceed to our findings in each city is the LIP was not the sole body responsible for each local community's SRI efforts. Both cities created alternative bodies to handle the SRI efforts, and the degree to which each LIP collaborated with these bodies that were set up for the SRI varied, with Waterloo's LIP collaborating more than Ottawa's. This is important context because it shaped LIP participation and municipal involvement in LIPs during the SRI. So to start with Waterloo, the role the regional municipality of Waterloo played in Waterloo's Immigration Partnership, or for short RIP, is linked to the fact that the regional municipality is RIP's contract holder. They hold the IRCC contract, okay? So because of this, the RIP is the recipient of a number of in-kind contributions from the regional municipality. And these in-kind contributions made a difference during the SRI. For example, having access to the regional municipality's digital and communications infrastructure allowed RIP to reach further and wider into community. This was crucial during the SRI when a large number of stakeholders were involved and consistent messaging was key. Since RIP staff are housed in regional municipal offices, they have access to regional municipal corporate leadership, and this really helped expedite decision making for the SSRI when time is of the essence and there was an urgency around things. As one participant stated, and I quote, "If your focus is dealing with newcomers and you're located in the community, you don't necessarily have access to the regional municipality. By being embedded in the regional municipality and having the ability to report to regional departments, LIP staff is known within the regional municipality." Okay, so there's an institutional knowledge and awareness of LIP personnel and the LIP's mandate, which really helps move things along. Now, furthermore, as part of the municipality, RIP has a legal backbone and financial stability. You know, I felt for cash-strapped community organizations when we asked RIP about its budget for the SSRI, and a participant replied, "We didn't budget, we just did it." That's not always an option for organizations, especially settlement service organizations that are depending on grants and contract funding. And that statement is really reflective of a high level of financial stability. That said, the regional municipality's role in RIP goes beyond monetary contributions to really a particular mindset participants identified. This sentiment is perhaps best summed up by a participant when comparing the regional municipality's view of RIP during the SSRI to a municipality in another city who held a LIP contract. And I quote, "When I was talking to my counterpart in another city, they said, why are you so heavily involved in this? This is not a municipal thing. And I said, here it is, because the LIP is part of the regional municipality. Thus, simply because a LIP is attached to a municipality does not necessarily mean there's a productive relationship. It has to go beyond that. So in contrast to RIP, the city of Ottawa is not Ottawa's local immigration partnership or OLIP's contract holder. Ottawa's largest settlement service agency is. So the city is a member of OLIP's council, and really in that case, just one member among many, not really different from the other members. So again, in a divergence from Waterloo, the city and OLIP's relationship really remained the same during the SSRI, and the lack of change is related to OLIP's limited role in the SSRI. So as one participant outlined, and I quote, OLIP was the second seat, end quote, or as another said, I don't think OLIP was positioned to support the direct response for the SSRI. And this really stems from the fact that the aforementioned Refugee 613 was the lead organization in Ottawa's response. They were at the front of the line running the show. So despite this, outside of OLIP, the city did take on a number of roles. The city created the Mayor's Public Forum on Syrian refugee resettlement efforts, designed to bring together religious and community leaders to discuss what could be done about the Syrian refugee crisis. The city also helped launch the United for Refugees fundraising campaign to help raise money for incoming Syrian refugees. And city staff participated in several Refugee 613 tables, helped settlement organizations with grant proposal writing for additional funding. And in terms of public health, provided many services. Public health is one of the core pieces of the City of Ottawa's municipal mandate. Now, while the city's efforts are certainly admirable, what our findings found notable wasn't so much what the city was doing, but how their activity represented such a departure from their history in this area. And the source of this change lies not only from within the city, but according to participants, OLIP. Many participants saw OLIP as responsible for the city's evolution on immigration. As one participant opined, and I quote, if the SRI had happened 5 years ago, municipal government would have said, yeah, this is funded by IRCC. What does this have to do with us? And analytically, what we can pull from this is OLIP, with its multi-sectoral makeup premised on a welcoming communities framework, which has brought all of these new sectors and organizations into settlement, has been able to develop a critical mass significant enough to influence municipal behavior on immigration. A similar situation played out in Waterloo region during the 2000s. A number of grassroots diversity initiatives happened in Waterloo, and one body emerged to address immigration issues, but it was without the participation of the regional municipality. Regional municipal participation did not occur in any local diversity initiatives until IRCC put out a call for LIPs, and the organizations and sectors responsible for activity in this area locally approached the regional municipality about joining, and only at that point did they join themselves. So there was very much community influence, support, or perhaps you could even say pressure to address that. So where do our findings fit in the larger picture? Well, research shows a well-developed settlement and advocacy sector, or the rapid growth of an immigrant group, can cause municipal movement on immigration. However, these realities are more associated with gateway cities like Toronto, Vancouver, and are typically less present in non-traditional settlement destinations. What our findings demonstrate is municipalities' relations with the community or developments in the community like LIPS can influence municipal behavior on immigration. Therefore, outside gateway cities, there are other push factors changing how municipalities see their local immigration mandate. And this really helps us expand understanding of how different settlement models work across Canada, because settlement is a very place-based process, and there are rarely only two settlement bodies alike. Okay, so I would just end with a few of our limitations from our research. One, I alluded to this earlier, is the unique timing of our data collection. Now, at the time, the SSRI was a once in a generation event. There wasn't really anything like it. You had to go back to the Indo-Chinese refugee crisis in the late 70s and early 80s to find a comparable. And because of this, it caught the Canadian government's and the public's attention in a way very few migration issues ever do. And because of this, what started as a national issue really trickled down to a local level. And what we found was, people were looking for municipalities, because they're always the government closest to the people, to get involved in some type of way or show they're being involved. So there's pros and cons to this, because it did result in richer and more extensive data collection, but at the same time, it is somewhat special, maybe even unique in terms of the timing. So that's just some things to keep in mind. And just once again, I would just like to thank our partners, thank SSHRC and IRCC for funding it, and our partners down below. And I will leave it there. Okay, so we had anybody who has questions, we've asked you to put them in the chat, or sorry, the Q&A function below. I saw there was already one that Aishan was asking about her presentation. Aishan, if I read out the question, do you mind just elaborating on a bit about what the question was? So the question for Aishan was, what are some broader challenges that OLIP, which is Ottawa's Local Immigration Partnership, faced in implementing the Ottawa immigration strategy?
Yes, thank you. It's very important question, because there are so many challenges, but two main challenges are first COVID-19 and some strategic and systematic issues within the government. The first one is COVID-19, because the pandemic affected disproportionately for the racialized and immigrant populations, and these systematic inequities affected newcomer students' academic achievement and well-being, and there is a data lack and unavailability to use and to employ to refresh the Ottawa immigration strategy to across the province achievement outcomes. So to know how it was lower for newcomers and for those residing in low-income neighborhoods, and compared to all students. The other main challenges I mentioned is absenteeism. It's increasing while implementing all the immigration strategy, especially while refreshing the third phase of the Ottawa immigration strategy. Partners express a need to explore and define deeper it, because behind it is there may be more racialized and systematic challenges related to student well-being in schools. So also I have added the third challenge two. As the Ontario Ministry of Education provided targeted investments to specific schools to improve graduation rates. For example, we do have the limitation of the rates of the students who graduate. For example, Black people, we do not know how many Black people are graduated, just we do not have any data to compare all of this information. So to know the how racialized they are within the education system, and this has not led to the desired outcomes, pointing to the internal equity capacity gaps in schools.
Okay, thank you very much, Aishan. Okay, so you have a couple questions for Shahab. So I'm gonna, I'll read them out, Shahab, and then you can answer the first one and then the second one. So I'll read the first one. So it says, great presentation. I was wondering if you would be interested in exploring how medical settlement organizations support access to healthcare services and how their approaches differ from non-medical settlement organizations, do you think medical settlement organizations may face fewer issues with limited government mandates or resources?
Yeah, thanks, Blair. So of course, we would be interested in exploring more about the activities put forward by these organizations. But first of all, this was a scoping review. So we mapped, identify, and reported on the existing literature after 2014. So that's the first point. So there might be some chances that we already have some papers or reports or articles that are covering this angle in their findings and results. But this is an idea, and for sure, there could be some chances for even our team or someone else to take lead on this opportunity and go further and explore the details of these organizations. And in terms of the involvement of the governmental bodies and their potential issues they might bring forward to organizations. With medical settlement organizations, I think they are already well established across all the countries and across any kind of settings you might consider, both for low to middle income countries and also high income countries. So based on my knowledge, even for COVID research studies, there is already a sensitivity on medical settlement organizations. So we could anticipate that there would be some limitations or some more impacts on the interventions that are put forward by medical settlement organizations on behalf of the government. That's what I'm predicting for now, but for sure we should go into existing literature and because always existing literature mirrors what's out there, right? So I'm pulling back from any assumptions here. I was just stating my thoughts here, honestly, but that could be a possibility, I think.
Okay, great answer. So I'll read out the next one here, Shalom. So thank you for a wonderful presentation. Have you had a chance to check the reports published by non-medical settlement organizations in Canada on their websites? Did they discuss how they support access to healthcare services? As reports published by organizations themselves may have more detailed information, this might be a valuable source to consider.
Okay, so as I said, for our eligibility criteria and in terms of the budget, the staff and team members we had, and to respect the time we put aside for this project, we just included published papers with an explicit and clear statements in terms of data collection methods and analysis. Of course, we took a look at those resources because they gave us some insights, some general insights to initiate our project, honestly. But those are listed under great literature, and even for great literature, you should respect some framework. So you should go into some specific organizations, have them on board, even along with your team members, and let them share their thoughts or insights that might impact your methodology. So this was a scoping review, and we just applied some filters to come up with some ideas. But as I said, as an impact of our research paper, there could be some knowledge translation activities, and with those activities, we could have some case studies, for example, that we might have some help from, for example, OLIP and their reported documents, and let them share the results, which could, for example, impact their results and findings.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting question, because a lot of my cases when I do my research, like obviously you have to use an academic framework, but in terms of getting details, it's tough just based on the nature of academic publishing to always get those. So to have those as background things, I understand that was beyond the purposes of your study, but like that's a gold mine in terms of stuff. Anyways, I'll be quiet now. So Aishan, I have this other one for you. So I'm going to read this out. Thank you for your time and for sharing about the work that OLIP has been doing. I'm wondering if you have any data on how the OIS has helped immigrants and racialized people in Ottawa. Do any of the programs implemented by the OIS obtain feedback from the participants? And if so, what are their thoughts?
Thank you, Blair. First, I want to give some background information regarding the role of OLIP for OIS, because OLIP's role is networking role between the partners to refresh the Ottawa immigration strategy priorities and then actions within 5 years. And we have, yes, quite important qualitative reviews and scoping reviews and data sets among our partners. And according to this information, there is significant growth in newcomer population in Ottawa and consequently in the student bodies of all 4 Ottawa school boards. And existing supports for newcomer students will have to confront higher demand in the next 5 years, because we are expecting 55,000 new permanent residents to come to Ottawa in the next 3 years. But this does not include the new arrivals from Ukraine and Afghanistan. We are waiting for data on these populations. And if we include temporary residents, we have forecasted an annual arrival of 30,000 newcomers in Ottawa. And regarding the racialized people, we have some information and data regarding older and teenager newcomer students, because they face, according to our research, face most challenges compared to other age groups. More older newcomer youth dropped out of school as a pandemic created an additional pressure for them. And one of the main points at the end of the findings of the research by the OLIP and its partners, mental health well-being is emerging as a key concern in schools. You shared priority on newcomer students' mental health well-being across the 4 school boards will be needed to build culturally appropriate and trauma-informed mental health counseling in schools that's targeted to the needs of newcomer students. So for the first third phase of the refreshment process for Ottawa immigration strategy, we do not have yet all of the census data available to compare all of the information for the racialized people in Ottawa.
Okay, thank you very much, Aisha. Very detailed, informative answer. Okay, folks, so we have like 1 minute left here. I'll just take the last question and then we'll call it. So the question was, for all panelists, what recommendations would you provide to other LIPs across Canada in terms of enhancing collaboration, community engagement? The biggest one that I've seen in my own research is local ownership and establishing local ownership. Because these are IRCC funded, in a lot of cases, communities view them as IRCC entities. And that can really put a drag on engagement and collaboration and just commitment overall, because at the end of the day, LIPs are very much volunteer organizations. With the exception of the contract holder, the participants in the organizations, they don't have any formal commitment or binding agreement to be there. So in terms of getting that buy-in, getting that local ownership is just so key to how LIPs operate and how they play out. Anyways, that's a short answer. I just want to end by thanking all of the attendees who came here and listened. We are very grateful. I also want to thank Pathways to Prosperity Partnership Canada. They are an exceptional organization. I'm old enough to know about what the settlement practice and policy world looked like without them before things started. And they've just been a godsend in terms of getting this type of data and information, not just collected, but distributed. So I very much like to thank them. And also I'd like to thank all of the panelists and co-authors participate as well. Thank you all very much, folks. Have yourselves a great day.